Welcome aboard Flight Simmers, my name is Rowan, I'm a real life commercial multi-engine pilot, and today we're jumping back in the Diamond DA42. This is going to be the second part of the how-to series for the Diamond DA42, which was recently released by Cow Simulation. So in the first episode we looked at how to properly pre-flight the aircraft, and now we're going to start getting the systems alive and powering this beauty up. So let's just get right into it and start pulling up the checklist. So let's just pull up the check before engine start checklist from the official Diamond DA42 version 6. And basically what we're going to do is go over pre-flight, which has been complete. Baggage and tow bar are secured, so what this means is that they aren't connected to the aircraft. They are either secured inside the aircraft or secured outside. Next up we have our aux pumps, which are down here. These are basically pumps which pump straight from the auxiliary tank, which are located inside of the engine cowling at the rear. These are basically our extension tanks or our long range tanks to supply our main tanks with extra fuel for longer flights. Power levers checked below and are at idle. Parking brake is set. Our fuel pumps, left and right, or 1 and 2, however you want to call it, is set to off. Gear selector is down. Manual gear extension is pushed. Avionics master right here is set to off. Electric master is set to off. Both of our engine master switches are set to off. Pitot heat is off. Alternators are set to on. Photo switches, both left and right, are set to auto. Coming up to our lights are all off. Emergency switch is off and guarded with a wire. ELT over here is set to armed. And then all of our circuit breakers over here are pushed in. And then our flap selector is set to up. And then obviously our alternate air underneath here is set to closed. So if you didn't realise, what all this is essentially one big clockwise circuit of checking all of the switches and buttons, making sure that they're in the correct position, which should mostly be off except for the alternators. Now that we've done this, what we can do is bring on the electric master and listen to those systems coming up. The G1000, the hydraulics, very good. And then afterwards we can adjust our rudder pedals. We don't need to do that because we're not flying it in real life. Trims, we want to make sure that they're checked, so they're currently set to takeoff. Same with our rudder trim, they're set to neutral. Our flight controls we can check. So what we're going to do is make sure that we have full range and it is free and accurate. Same thing for the rudder pedals, full left and full right. Lovely stuff. Gear warning test. This is an important one because we want to make sure that our landing gear is functional and all of the warnings and enunciators are going to be working just in case if we do have any issues. So what we're doing is holding onto it, checking all 3 lights, or checking all 4 lights, being the 3 greens, 1 red.
Check gear.
And also checking, and also looking for the check gear up here. Once that's complete, you can let go of it, and that's a complete gear test. We are going to skip past all the anti-icing. We're going to pretend that it's not there. And then what we want to do now is check our flaps. So we're going to set them to full range. Make sure that they are correct on both sides. And then bring them up to the approach detent. Make sure that they are correct. And once again, back up to up. Confirming with a switch and also visually confirming, which is good. Also going to click on enter to accept the G1000. Now the next step is very interesting. What we're trying to do is test a system which I don't think many people fully understand. So what's going to happen is that we are going to basically go full aft on the stick, and what we're going to then do is apply full throttle, and if you notice the trim is going to start pushing forward. It's going to start trimming the aircraft forward so that when we do accelerate the throttles forward, we're not going to pitch up too high and then potentially create damage structurally to the aircraft. And then afterwards we can just go full idle and we should see the trim coming back to its neutral state which is correct. Next we've got the passengers, so we want to make sure we're instructing our passengers. We don't have any passengers today, but if you did, you want to use the safety mnemonic, which means seat belts, air vents, fire extinguisher, which should be located behind, emergency exit, so our red levers, and also the canopy disconnect. Talking, so during critical stages of the flight you want to introduce stealth cockpit, and then any questions. That's basically what the safety mnemonic means. Then our seatbelts, we want to make sure that they're both fastened. Our rear door, let's close that, or make sure that is closed. As it is, closed and latched. Our front canopy, we can then close. G1000 has been powered and acknowledged, so we've clicked on enter on the right hand side as well. Our MFD, we want to make sure that's set to engine mode, as it is currently. In real life, this would completely remove the whole map and basically load up extra information regarding the engines. Unfortunately, because this is the default Osobo G1000, it does not have that capability as of this moment. Then we want to check our fuel quantity, so we got 24 and the fuel temperature is in the green. We want to make note of our total time, so how much tack hours and hobs we've got on each engine. And then we can insert the start key right here, as it already is. And then we would want to make sure that our throttles are set to idle, so we do not start the engine at a higher RPM than what it should be. Then, to make it clear to everyone else that's around us that we're about to start, we want to turn on our strobe, make sure that we're visible to everyone else, and then we can start the engine start procedure. So we always start with a left, so what we're going to do is check that the propeller area is clear. We could turn on the engine master. We are going to look on the enunciations board and we're going to see glow plugs, or the left glow on. This is basically going to heat up the cylinder so that it can combust. And then all we got to do now is just switch on the key, look over here. We should be outside of the red within 3 seconds for oil pressure. And then afterwards we want to check our voltages and amps, so we've got suitable volts and our amps are alive as well. And then we're going to repeat that for the right engine, so bring on the engine master, look for the glow plugs, going to be heating up the cylinder. As we don't have spark plugs, it combusts off of heat and compression. And then we're going to switch on the start key. 1, 2, 3 outside of the red, and check in the system for our volts and amps as well, so the right generator is working. Cool. And that's how we start up the engine. After start, what we want to do is check the oil pressure, make sure it's still in the green. Looking for our RPMs, we want to be within 30 RPM of 710 on both engines. Fuel selectors, once we're on, we want to bring these over to crossfeed. We want to basically make sure that we can still pull fuel from the other side. We'll leave this on for at least a minute just to make sure that there's no issues with the fuel flow and such. Then we want to bring on the pitot heat, which is also the stall heat as well. So what this is going to do is basically turn on the systems, and what we want to check for is our ampage. So if we switch it off, our amps are going to decrease, or vice versa. Switch it on, amps are going to increase, volts are going to decrease. And also checking for the stall heat and pitot heat enunciations to go off as well. Then after all this, we can turn on the avionics master, which would then start bringing on the rest of the avionics systems, such as our COM2, all of the background systems which the G1000 requires power to operate. And then we don't have a weather radar installed either. At this point, what we would do is bring up our flight plan if we were doing a normal flight. Start off with our origin airport and end up with our destination with our en route, whether if it's through airways or direct through other airports. But we're not going to do that today, as we're going to fly locally.
TOS system test, okay.
And there's the TOS system test. Next up, we're going to test the autopilot, make sure it's working. So basically what we want to test for at first is if we have a runaway trim. So if our autopilot is on and it's going to start rapidly trimming, what we want to do is basically press the autopilot disconnect button, which should stop the trim from running away, which would then give us time to pull out the autopilot circuit breaker and then basically manually trim from there onwards. Then we want to turn on the autopilot and then check for the flight director, make sure it comes on, and then what we can do is press the autopilot disconnect button. So with that we can say the autopilot test is complete. Due to the time of day we do not require our floodlights or our position lights. Now that we've had our fuel selectors on cross feed for a while, we can then bring them back to on, which starts pulling from its own side of the tank. So the right's pulling from the right and the left pulling from the left now. Our altimeters, we want to make sure it's set to local pressure. It seems like it's standard today, 29902. Our standby horizon, we can pull it just to gauge. Our transponder is set to 1200. Our engine temperature, so they're nearly in with green, so we'll give it a little bit longer and it'll be fine. Okay, so now we've completed the start checklist. All we need to do is taxi so we could perform a run up. Just to keep in mind that the nose wheel is connected directly to the rudder pedals, however it only moves up to 15 degrees I believe. So how we get past this is that we're going to initially lead with our rudders and then follow through using asymmetric thrust if we need to turn more sharply. So let's get moving now so we can do the run up. So start off, we're going to bring on the taxi light, of course. We're going to disconnect the parking brake and we're going to go right rudder, increase a little bit of throttle, and then have a bit more asymmetric thrust so we can maneuver a lot more sharply. This aircraft doesn't require much thrust because it is a very light aircraft, and having two engines as well, it is a very overpowered aircraft, so it doesn't take much to get it moving. Okay, so what we're going to do now is start to position ourselves away from the taxiway so that we're not throwing any debris onto the rest of the taxiway, and we're going to set our parking brake and run through our run-up checklists. So how we're going to perform this is by first off going through our before takeoff check, which would be parking brake, which is set, our seatbelts are fastened, our backrests are upright, our rear door is closed and latched, our front canopy is closed and latched, the front baggage doors in front are closed and latched, our door warning light on the annunciations panel is off, our circuit breakers, just checking, none of them are popped out. Next up, the elevator trim, we want to make sure this is set to takeoff. It appears that it has run back. So what we're going to do is bring it forward as such. Our flaps, because we're doing a short field takeoff due to the length of the runway, we're going to set it to approach. And then our flight controls, we're going to check them again, so go full left. And also checking the tail, and also checking the elevator. We can see that it's moving up and down, and then checking that our rudder pedals are free as well. Our power levers are set to idle, as checked. And then our PFD, we want to make sure we're on the engine page. And then what we're going to do is check our engine instruments as we have and test out the voter switches. So what these are is basically each engine has two individual ECUs, which stands for engine control unit. So basically two computers per engine. And what we want to do is basically switch between each one on each engine just to make sure that they are individually working. So if we did have a faulty ECU, we probably would have had an annunciation by now. And then same thing, we're going to test each ECU. And now that we've done that, we can then do the ECU test, which will then test all of the different components which the ECUs runs. So the ECUs control the prop gov, the wastegate, glow plugs, fuel injectors, and the common rail, which basically injects all of the fuel. And to test both at the same time, there is a click spot in between both ECU tests. And then what we want to do is hold it. Looking over here, we're looking for 1800 RPM on both engines, which we've achieved. And then the propeller is going to cycle through. And then it's going to do it again, because it's testing both A and B ECUs for both engines. So we've reached the 1800 RPM, it's feathering, and now it's coming back down. And then we're looking down here for the ECU fails for the left, right, A, B to go out. And that is how you perform the ECU test, and that is the run-up complete. Now that we've done that, we could go through the rest of the checklist. So pitot heat, which is not required. Transponder, we want to make sure it's still set to 1200, being VFR day. Fuel pumps, we want to make sure those are turned on. Our MFD is set to default, or with the map. And then our parking brake can now be released so we can taxi for takeoff. And that is it. That is how we do the run-up for the whole aircraft from start to finish. And unfortunately, we're going to have to leave this video here. So if you want to see more, make sure you do leave a comment down below, and we'll continue on with this short series of us flying the Diamond DA42, which was created and recently released by Cow's Simulations. If you did find this video useful, please let me know, and we'll be sure to make more content similar to this. But please remember, this is just a simulator and is for entertainment purposes only. But with that, we do have to wrap this video up now. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support the channel, make sure you do click on that like, subscribe, and ding dong that notification bell. My name is Rowan, and you've been watching Information Alpha. See ya.